The rain had been falling since afternoon, the kind that didn't rush or roar but pressed down steadily, soaking everything with quiet patience. It clung to the pavement, darkened the cracks in the sidewalk, and slid down the sleeves of her thin jacket until the fabric felt heavier than it should have been. She stood beneath a buzzing streetlight that flickered every few seconds, counting the coins and wrinkled bills in her palm for the third time, even though the total never changed. $8. She knew the number by heart now. 2 crumpled bills and a handful of coins that smelled faintly of metal and old pockets. Enough, maybe, for a loaf of bread and a packet of instant noodles. Not enough for tomorrow. Definitely not enough for mistakes. She closed her fingers around the money and slipped it back into her pocket, exhaling slowly as if she could breathe the hunger away. Her stomach had been tight all day, a dull ache that flared every time she passed a restaurant or caught the smell of frying food. She told herself she'd get through the night. She always did. The gas station behind her was dark, windows shuttered, the sign buzzing weakly like it was tired of pretending to work. This corner of the city emptied early. People hurried through during daylight, then vanished once the sun dropped, leaving only shadows and the echo of passing cars. That was when she noticed the motorcycle. It sat across the street, angled slightly toward the curb, big and heavy, its metal frame catching the streetlight in sharp flashes. It didn't belong here. It looked too powerful, too loud, even standing still. A man leaned against it, one hand braced on the seat, the other pressed against his arm. Her first instinct was to walk away. Men like that didn't bring good things. Everyone knew it. Leather jacket, thick boots, tattoos creeping up his neck and disappearing under his collar. The kind of presence that made people cross the street without thinking. The kind that turned heads for all the wrong reasons. She adjusted her jacket and took a step forward, eyes fixed ahead, pretending she hadn't seen him. Then she heard him breathe. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a short, uneven sound that didn't fit the tough image he wore so easily. Like each breath cost him something. She slowed. Her mind immediately filled with warnings. Don't stare. Don't get involved. You don't have anything to give. You don't have room for trouble. Every lesson she'd learned about survival pushed her forward, urged her to keep moving. She took another step. Then something clattered softly against the pavement. She glanced back to spite herself and saw a cigarette lying in a shallow puddle near his boot, its paper already unraveling. His hand hovered above it, fingers trembling slightly, like he wasn't sure whether to bother picking it up. "Damn it," he muttered, voice low and rough. It wasn't anger that caught her attention. It was exhaustion. She stopped. For a moment, she just stood there, rain dripping off her hair, heart beating a little too fast. She could still walk away. Nothing bad would happen if she did. Nothing good either, but that was life. Neutral choices were safer. But when she looked at him again, she noticed the dark stains spreading along his sleeve, the way his jaw clenched as if pain was something to be swallowed, not shown. She turned around. Each step back toward him felt heavier than the last. She was aware of her smallness, the way her shoes squeaked against wet concrete, the way the distance between them closed too quickly. He noticed her when she was only a few feet away, his head lifting, eyes sharp and alert despite the fatigue written into his posture. "What?" he said, voice guarded. "You're bleeding," she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. He glanced down at his arm like it was an inconvenience. "It's nothing. It doesn't look like nothing," he snorted quietly. "You should mind your own business." She hesitated, fingers curling around the edge of her jacket. He wasn't wrong. This wasn't her business. None of it was. And yet, here she was, standing in the rain with someone everyone else would have avoided. "You need help," she said. He laughed once, dry and humorless. "That's a good one." She swallowed, feeling the weight of her pocket press against her hip. "There's a clinic nearby. They'll take care of that." "With what money?" he asked, eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the bills, flattening them against her palm like she needed to see them again to be sure they were real. "This," she said softly. His gaze dropped to the money, then flicked back up to her face. Something shifted in his expression, not softness, not gratitude, but surprise. That's all you got? He asked. Yes. The rain seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. Cars passed at the end of the street, their headlights briefly illuminating the scene before disappearing again. He studied her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. You don't know who I am, he said slowly. She met his gaze. I know you're hurt. His jaw tightened. People usually run from me. She shrugged, a small, tired movement. I'm already tired of running. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he pushed himself upright, wincing slightly as he shifted his weight. Up close, she could see how pale he looked beneath the grime and rain, how tightly he was holding himself together. You're making a bad choice, he said. Maybe, she replied. But it's my choice. He stared at her again, then shook his head as if he didn't quite understand her. You've got guts, he said. Or no sense. Could be both. That earned him a brief, surprised huff of laughter. They walked side by side toward the clinic, the distance between them filled with unspoken tension. She was aware of every sound, every shadow. She kept her head up, refusing to shrink even when a couple of people glanced at them and quickly looked away. At the clinic, the nurse's eyes flicked from his jacket to her face, lingering just a second too long. The look wasn't kind. You paying for him? The nurse asked. Yes, she said. The word felt heavier than the money itself. As she handed over the cash, a knot formed in her chest. This was it. No backup. No second chance. When the bills left her hand, the last thin layer between her and nothing disappeared. He watched her the entire time. When they finished cleaning and stitching his arm, he stood carefully, testing his balance. The color had returned slightly to his face, but the hardness was back in his eyes. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly as they stepped back into the rain. I know. Then why? She thought about lying. Thought about giving him something simple, something that wouldn't open old wounds. Instead, the truth slipped out. Because once, no one helped someone I loved, she said. And I promised myself I wouldn't be like that. He didn't respond right away. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and held it out to her. If you ever need help, he said, don't lose this. She took it without opening it, her fingers numb from the cold and everything else. They parted ways a block later. She watched him disappear into the rain, the motorcycle engine roaring to life and fading into the distance. As she turned toward home, the emptiness in her pocket felt louder than the engine ever had. She didn't know it yet, but that night would follow her into morning. Morning came too fast. She woke to the sound of someone knocking on a door down the hall, the sharp echo bouncing through the thin walls of the building. For a moment, she lay still, staring at the water stain on her ceiling, trying to remember where she was and why her chest felt so tight. Then hunger twisted again, and memory rushed back in layers, the rain, the blood, the $8 leaving her hand. Her pocket was empty. She sat up slowly, letting her feet touch the cold floor. The room felt smaller than it had the night before, like the walls had crept inward while she slept. Sunlight filtered through the torn curtain, landing on the cracked pane near the window. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt secure anymore. She dressed quietly, moving with the careful efficiency of someone used to having very little. The last slice of bread sat on the counter, already dry at the edges. She hesitated, then wrapped it in paper and slipped it into her bag. She didn't know when she'd eat again. The hallway smelled like old carpet and damp air. As she locked her door, she noticed a white sheet of paper taped crookedly beside the frame. Her stomach dropped before she even read it. Past due. Final notice. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the paper down, folding it once, then again, as if making it smaller could make the problem manageable. She had no money, no favors left to call in, no room to negotiate. Outside, the city moved on without her. People hurried past with headphones in, coffee cups in hand, lives intact. She walked to work, the folded notice pressing against her ribs like a reminder that time was running out. The cafe was already busy. Steam rose from the espresso machine, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air, rich and cruel. She tied her apron and took her place at the sink, scrubbing plates with hands that still felt raw from the night before. She hadn't even been there an hour when her manager called her name. "Can you step into the back?" The room behind the kitchen was narrow and dim, stacked with boxes and cleaning supplies. He didn't look at her right away, just leaned against the counter with his arms crossed. "Look," he said finally, "I don't want problems here." Her heart sank. "I don't cause problems." He sighed, rubbing his face. "People talk. They saw you last night." She swallowed. "Saw me doing what?" "Helping the wrong kind of person," he replied. "That's not the image we want." The words stung more than she expected. "He was hurt," she said quietly. "That's not the point," he snapped, then softened his tone. "I'm just saying, maybe keep your distance. For your own good." She nodded because there was nothing else she could do. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of clattering dishes and murmured conversations that stopped when she walked by. She felt eyes on her back, curiosity mixed with judgment. By the time her break came, she had no appetite left. She sat outside on the curb, unwrapping the bread and tearing it into small pieces, chewing slowly. Across the street, a woman whispered something to her friend and glanced in her direction. They both laughed quietly. She kept her head down. By evening, exhaustion pressed into her bones. She walked home with the sun low on the horizon, the sky painted in colors that felt undeserved. When she reached her building, a familiar figure stood near the entrance. The landlord. He held a clipboard, eyes sharp as they landed on her. "We need to talk." Her pulse quickened. "I saw the notice." "Good," he said. "Then you know this can't keep going." "I just need a little more time," she pleaded. "I'll figure something out." He scoffed. "You always say that." She clenched her hands. "Please." He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "You've got 1 week. After that, I change the locks." She watched him walk away, her chest aching with a mix of fear and anger. 1 week. It might as well have been 1 day. Inside her apartment, the silence was heavy. She dropped her bag on the floor and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the folded paper the biker had given her. She'd forgotten about it entirely. For a long time, she didn't touch it. Calling for help felt like admitting defeat. Like proving everyone right, that she couldn't survive on her own. And besides, she didn't even know what it was. A number? A joke? A kindness meant for someone braver than her? She left it where it was. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every sound from the street made her flinch. Every passing siren felt personal. She replayed the clinic scene over and over, wondering if she'd imagined the look in his eyes when she handed over the money. Wondering if any of it had mattered at all. The next day was worse. Her manager cut her hours. Customers avoided her. Someone muttered something under their breath as she passed, something about getting involved where she didn't belong. By afternoon, she felt hollow. On her walk home, a police cruiser rolled slowly past, then stopped. An officer leaned out the window. "Everything okay?" he asked, eyes scanning her. "Yes," she said quickly. He lingered for a second too long before driving off. She hugged her jacket tighter around herself. When she reached her street, she noticed something strange. A man she didn't recognize stood across the road, leaning against a parked car. He wasn't doing anything suspicious, just watching the building like he was waiting for someone. She slowed. Another figure appeared at the end of the block. Then another. Her heart began to race. She crossed the street, then crossed back, testing whether they moved. They didn't follow. They just stayed where they were. At home, she locked the door behind her, breathing hard. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Had she done something wrong? Had helping that man marked her somehow? She paced the room, stopping only when the folded paper caught her eye again. This time, she picked it up. Her fingers hovered for a moment before unfolding it. Inside was a phone number, handwritten, and beneath it a simple message. You did good. Her throat tightened. She didn't call. Instead, she sat by the window as the sky darkened, watching headlights pass and shadows stretch along the pavement. The city felt charged, like something was shifting beneath its surface. Late that night, she heard it. A low hum in the distance. Not sirens. Not traffic. Engines. Dozens of them. Her heart pounded as the sound grew louder, closer, vibrating through the glass. She stood slowly, every nerve on edge, and peeked through the curtain. Motorcycles rolled onto the street one by one, headlights cutting through the darkness. She stepped back from the window, breath caught in her chest, realizing something she couldn't quite explain. Whatever she had done with those $8 hadn't ended at the clinic. It had only just begun. She didn't sleep at all. The sound of engines echoed in her head long after the street fell quiet again, like a memory that refused to settle. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw headlights cutting through darkness, felt the vibration of something large and unstoppable moving closer. By dawn, her body felt hollow, stretched thin by fear and exhaustion. When morning finally arrived, it didn't bring relief. It brought silence. The street outside her window looked normal again. Empty. Too empty. No motorcycles. No strangers lingering on corners. Just the cracked pavement, a trash bin tipped on its side, and the same tired buildings leaning toward each other like they always had. She told herself she had imagined it. Stress did strange things to people. Hunger made everything louder. Fear filled in gaps that logic couldn't. Still, she moved carefully as she left her apartment, locking the door twice before forcing herself to walk away. Her steps felt heavier than usual, like the air itself resisted her movement. Every sound made her glance over her shoulder. Every unfamiliar face tightened something in her chest. At the cafe, the tension followed her inside. Two men sat at a corner table, both wearing dark jackets despite the mild weather. They weren't drinking coffee. They weren't talking. They were watching the room with a quiet attentiveness that made her skin prickle. When she walked past them to the sink, one of them nodded to the other, just slightly. Her heart skipped. She tried to focus on work, on the simple rhythm of rinsing and stacking plates, but her thoughts kept drifting. Had she been followed? Had the man she helped brought something dangerous into her life without meaning to? During her break, she slipped outside and leaned against a brick wall, breathing in slow, measured pulls. She told herself she was being paranoid. She had no power, no money, no importance. Why would anyone pay attention to her? Her phone buzzed. She froze. No one ever texted her. With shaking hands, she pulled it from her pocket. The number was unfamiliar. No name attached. Just a single message. Did you get home safe? Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. She stared at the screen, then at the street, half expecting to see someone watching her read it. She didn't reply. A second message appeared almost immediately. I won't bother you again. Just wanted to know. Something in her chest eased, just a fraction. The words weren't threatening. They weren't demanding. They felt careful. She typed slowly, deleting and rewriting twice before finally sending a reply. Yes. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Good. That was all. The rest of the day passed in uneasy fragments. Her manager avoided her. The two men left without finishing their drinks. When she closed up and stepped outside, the street was clear. On the walk home, she noticed small things she'd never paid attention to before. A black car parked at the same corner for too long. A man stepping aside to let her pass, his eyes lowering respectfully. Another nod, subtle but deliberate, from someone she'd never met. It didn't feel like surveillance. It felt like something else. That night, a knock came at her door. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, heart racing, every instinct screaming at her to stay silent. The knock came again, firm but not aggressive. She swallowed and moved toward the door, peering through the peephole. 2 figures stood in the hallway. One she recognized immediately, even without the jacket soaked in rain, even without blood on his sleeve. He stood straight now, calm, composed. The other man beside him looked older, his posture relaxed but authoritative in a way that made the narrow hallway feel smaller. She opened the door a crack. "I don't have anything," she said before either of them could speak. He shook his head gently. "That's not why we're here." She hesitated, then opened the door fully. The room suddenly felt too small for all the weight they carried in with them. "You scared me," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "I'm sorry for that." The older man glanced around the apartment, taking in the bare walls, the thin mattress, the patched-up furniture. His expression didn't change, but something dark passed behind his eyes. "She doesn't look like trouble," he said. "She isn't," the first man replied. They sat at the small table, careful not to crowd her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he leaned forward slightly. "You probably think you made a mistake," he said. She crossed her arms. "Everything in my life says I did." He nodded once. "That's fair." The older man finally spoke. "What you did wasn't small." She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "It was $8. It was dignity," he corrected. "And respect. Those are harder to come by." She looked between them, confusion mixing with something she didn't dare name yet. "People have been watching me," she said. "At my job. On my street. That's on me," he admitted. "When my people heard what you did, they wanted to make sure you were safe." Her breath caught. "Your people?" He didn't dodge the question. "I lead a chapter. Not the kind you read about. We have rules. Codes. You helped one of ours without asking who he was or what he could give you back." The older man nodded. "That kind of thing gets noticed." She leaned back in her chair, mind spinning. "I didn't do it for that." "We know," he said. "That's why this matters." Silence settled again, heavier now but not hostile. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast, something she didn't fully understand. "I don't want trouble," she said finally. "You didn't invite it," the older man replied. "You challenged it." He stood, straightening his jacket. "There are people in this city who take advantage of kindness. We don't allow that." She looked up at him. "What does that mean?" He smiled faintly. "It means no one touches you. No one pressures you. No one scares you again." After he left, the first man stayed behind. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same folded paper she still had tucked into her drawer. "I meant what I wrote," he said. "You did good." She studied his face, seeing him clearly now. Not as something to fear, but as someone shaped by choices just like hers. "Why me?" she asked. He stood, meeting her gaze. "Because the world expects people like you to walk past. You didn't." When he left, she sat alone in the quiet, hands resting on the table, heart still racing but no longer from fear. Outside, engines started one by one, then faded into the distance. She realized then that the night before hadn't been a warning. It had been a promise. And whatever was coming next would change everything she thought she knew about power, kindness, and who truly held it. She woke to a sound she had never heard outside her building before. Not shouting. Not sirens. Not the usual chaos of the city waking up late and angry. This was deeper. Controlled. A steady vibration that rolled through the walls and into her bones. Engines. She sat up slowly, heart pounding, breath shallow. For a moment she thought it might be another restless dream, her mind still playing tricks on her after days of tension. Then the vibration grew stronger, closer, unmistakably real. She stood and walked to the window. The street was full. Motorcycles lined both sides of the road, stretching farther than she could see from her fourth-floor window. Chrome reflected the morning light. Leather jackets moved in quiet coordination. Men and women stood beside their bikes, talking softly, laughing occasionally, all of it calm, purposeful, disciplined. At the center of it all, directly below her window, stood the man she had helped. He looked different now. Not just healed, complete. Clean jacket. Fresh bandage. His posture carried authority that didn't need to announce itself. People stepped aside when he moved, not out of fear, but respect. Her knees weakened. A knock came at her door. She didn't hesitate this time. When she opened it, the hallway was full of people who shouldn't have fit there. Leather. Boots. Tattoos. Faces marked by years of survival. And yet, every single pair of eyes softened when they landed on her. "Good morning," he said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "What's happening?" He gestured toward the window. "We're here to finish something." She stepped aside, letting them in. They didn't crowd her space. They didn't touch anything without asking. One woman smiled gently and picked up the eviction notice still folded on the table. "This won't be a problem anymore," she said. Before she could respond, another knock echoed from down the hall. The landlord's voice followed, louder than usual, forced and uneasy. She opened the door again. He froze when he saw who stood behind her. I was just coming to check." "You won't be checking anything," the older man said calmly, stepping forward. His voice was low, even, but it carried weight that silenced the hallway. "The rent is paid." The landlord blinked. "Paid? For the year," the man continued. "In advance. And the lease will be renewed. With updated terms." Someone handed the landlord an envelope. Thick. Heavy. Final. He nodded quickly, eyes darting from face to face. "Of course. Of course. No issues." When he left, his footsteps were fast and uneven. She leaned against the door, overwhelmed. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," the man said. "That's why you deserve it." They moved with purpose after that. 2 people repaired the broken lock on her door. Another fixed the flickering light in the kitchen. Someone else replaced the cracked window pane she'd taped over months ago. They worked efficiently, quietly, like a crew that had done this many times before. She stood in the middle of it all, unsure where to put her hands. A woman about her age approached, holding a cup of coffee. "You should eat," she said kindly. "You look like you haven't in a while." The warmth of the cup made her eyes sting. She nodded and took a sip, the bitterness grounding her. Outside, neighbors gathered. Some watched from windows. Others stepped onto balconies or sidewalks, whispering, staring, wondering what kind of person could draw this kind of attention. She felt their eyes. But for the first time, she didn't shrink under them. When the work was done, the man she had helped stepped forward again. He held an envelope in his hand. "This is yours," he said. She shook her head immediately. "No. I didn't help you for money." He gently closed her fingers around it. "I know. That's why this isn't charity." She hesitated, then opened it. Her breath caught. Inside was more money than she had ever seen in one place. Enough to breathe. Enough to plan. Enough to stop living one emergency away from collapse. "This will change my life," she whispered. "That already happened," he replied. "This just makes it easier." He nodded toward the woman who had given her coffee. "She runs an office for one of our businesses. She needs someone organized. Reliable. Honest." The woman smiled. "You start whenever you're ready." Tears spilled before she could stop them. She covered her mouth, embarrassed. "Don't," the man said gently. "Let it out. Strength doesn't mean being dry-eyed." Outside, engines rumbled again as people prepared to leave. One by one, they lined up, helmets going on, engines coming to life. The sound filled the street, powerful but not threatening. Before he turned to go, he paused and looked at her one last time. "You didn't see a patch," he said. "You didn't see a reputation. You saw a human being." She nodded, voice thick. "That shouldn't be rare." "But it is," he said. "That's why we showed up." The motorcycles rolled out slowly, respectfully, leaving the street quieter than it had been in days. When the last one disappeared around the corner, she stood alone in her doorway, the envelope pressed to her chest, the city suddenly different. Neighbors who had never spoken to her nodded. Someone smiled. Someone whispered her name like it meant something now. She stepped back inside her apartment. It felt larger, warmer, safer. She placed the envelope on the table and sat down, letting the silence settle. $8. That was all it had taken. Not bravery. Not strategy. Just a choice made when walking away would have been easier. She looked at her hands and smiled softly. In a world that taught her to survive by holding back, she had survived by giving. And that, she knew now, was real power.